Welcome back to episode 2 of whatever this is. In the previous episode where I reviewed Hot Lap League, I called this the show that doesn't have a name, where I play mobile games and tell you what I think about them. And while that's accurate, there's just one small problem with that. Yeah. But anyway, today I'm going to be talking about Dwarf Journey, which is a game that surprised me quite a bit, because it starts off as an action platformer and it kind of looks like one, but every time I try to play it like that, it just didn't work for me. Because even though it has a lot of action, you can't just run in and swing wildly. So instead what I did is I started to take my time and go into each room with precision and care, and then everything kind of just clicked. And that's the interesting thing, the game becomes all about weaving your way through the enemies, getting some sneaky hits in, and then backing off at just the right time. It's an interesting twist that makes the combat feel almost like a puzzle, because health is rare and hard to come by. Now, Dwarf's Journey is the story of Galar, a dwarf that has achieved everything in life. Growing older and fearful of death, he is enticed by whispers of a mysterious cave that grants immortality to anyone brave and strong enough to reach the artifact at its center. But while that sounds intriguing, that's kind of as far as the story goes. You get a cutscene at the start which introduces the character, and then another one at the end. And normally I wouldn't even mention a story that's this absent, but what little story there is kind of great. And what's also interesting is that at the very end you're asked to make an unexpectedly difficult choice, which gives you one of two different endings. They do a lot with very little, and I just wish there was more of it. Now, the gameplay itself feels quite familiar, taking inspiration from games like Rogue Legacy. Every time you enter the cave, the layout changes. When your character inevitably dies, it spits you out back at the entrance, wiser for the experience. Now, the game is a roguelite, which means that there is progression between runs, and there are 3 different ways where you can get stronger. First, you level up with experience, which gives you points to spend on improving your skills. Then there are different runes to find and equip. These can negate the penalty of heavy armor, for example, or revive you once per run. And then there's ore, which is the most interesting one of the 3. This ore is used to craft or upgrade your weapons and armor. You mine ore from veins inside the cave, but when you die, that ore is lost unless you bank it first at one of the minecarts scattered throughout the dungeon. You can only use each minecart once, which sets up risk in an interesting way. Do you push a little bit further to try and get a little bit more ore before you bank it? Or are you going to run into some tough enemies and lose it all? But that said, the risk only exists because every time you enter a new room, you're locked until all the enemies are defeated. And this is fine early on, but the further you get into the game, the more it feels like an artificial barrier. Progress is quite linear, so you always start in the cave area, defeat the boss, move on to the fire area, defeat that boss, and so on. And so by the time you have late game equipment, even the early game bosses go down in just a couple of hits. Every time you die, it becomes kind of like a walk of shame, where you're locked in room after room just blasting through the enemies, trying to get back to where you were before. Encountering new enemies for the first time and learning about their attack patterns and weaknesses is a lot of fun, but being forced to fight those same enemies over and over and over again is not so much. It's not all bad though, and I'm making it sound a little bit worse than it is. Boss rooms are revealed after you defeat the boss for the first time, so you're not just stumbling around in the dark looking for them. And you get a compass item that reveals the fastest path to the boss after having defeated one. But still, I wish you could just skip past all those enemies instead of feeling like Thanos beating up a toddler. I played the game with both the touchscreen and a controller, and both feel equally as good. You can move the controls around and resize them, and other than maybe the final boss, I had absolutely no problem in going back and forth between the two. It's not the most demanding game on your reflexes, and especially so if you play it a little bit safer and just going in for a couple of hits and then backing out again. And so in the end, I had a lot of fun with Dwarf Journey and enjoyed spending time on it. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it doesn't have to. It's just a solid entry from start to finish. If you were interested in Dwarf Journey, I hope this video helps you decide whether you want to check it out for yourself. And I hope you join me in the next video, where I play a story-focused adventure game about exploring an abandoned ? Spaceship. Ta-ta!